Right, thank you for waiting. And again, apologies for the delay. So what we are doing now is a panel session, which is dedicated to ReForest project. My name is Martin Lukac. I am the principal investigator for the project. I will run the session, but the main participants are Prajna and Tiago, and also all of the audience. I will explain. What we want to do is to show you what we have achieved so far in the project. That's the two presentations by Prajna and Tiago. And what we are after is feedback, suggestions, proposals from the audience, because clearly we cannot think of everything ourselves. That's not possible. So just very briefly to set this up, ReForest is, the aim of the project is to mainstream agroforestry in Europe. Agroforestry can be broadly described as farming with trees. So what we want to do is to make sure that more tree cover is present in Europe as we go forward. Agroforestry obviously is one of the regenerative agriculture techniques or strategies which we can use. And one of the reasons why we have the project and why agroforestry, despite all its attractions, is not currently something that farmers would consider automatically is finance and access to finance before you start agroforestry projects. And this is what Prajna and Tiago will be talking about. So without further ado, I will hand over to Prajna, who is joining us online from Bonn, and we'll do the first presentation today.
Great. Thank you, Martin, and thank you all for being here. And I apologize, I could not be there because of teaching duties and budget constraints. I hope I am audible to everyone. Yes? Yeah, wonderful. All right, then, yes. So I am Prajna, and I work at the Indus Horticultural Sciences University of Bonn with Professor Ludling, and we are working together on the ReForest project with Martin and Tiago. And our work mainly involved identifying the institutional barriers, what are the different incentives that are present currently, and then how can we best support the decision-making towards adoption of agroforestry within Europe. Okay. Yeah, so as Martin mentioned, we really wanted to understand what is hindering the widespread adoption of agroforestry, despite it being a multifunctional regenerative land use strategy that actually very strongly aligns with European Union's climate and sustainability goals. Yeah. So what we found was that despite all of this, the paradox does not seem to stem from the lack of interest or whatever environmental relevance that the practice in itself has, but rather from this complex set of institutional, financial, regulatory challenges that persist across different member states within the Europe. And this is something that we came across not only with the literature that we have gone through, but also with the two key stakeholder workshops that we conducted for the project as well as outside the project back in 2023 and 2024. And what we realized was there is a need to actually capture these institutional barriers, and we thought of doing it country-wise and identifying what are these different barriers. So we started off with the document analysis, policy analysis. We dove into different CAP strategic plans of all the member states and extensive literature review. We also spoke to the regional experts. These includes the agroforestry associations in each of the countries, as well as different our living labs and the project partners who are actually the experts who work continuously with the farmers in the locality and know very well what are the different barriers that the farmers face for adopting agroforestry. And we kind of ended up complementing the reports that EMEA published in their 5.1, the deliverable that they submitted on mapping reports for agroforestry sector finance and policy 1. With that, we were actually also able to qualitatively assess the practical insights into the funding structures and how does it influence the economic viability using the dynamic management tool that we developed. All of this is actually captured in the deliverable that we submitted as part of our work. So the project is it's titled Country-Specific Mappings of Institutional Barriers. So a little bit peeking into what the report actually contains, right? So what we identified, the very first institutional barrier for adoption of agroforestry is the definition of agroforestry itself. While there is a very general definition that Martin just spoke to us about, what the EU did was to actually legitimize the agroforestry as an agricultural activity and ask the member states to define it within their CAP strategic plan. What it led to was each country or each member state having their own definition, giving their own specification, and these were defined in terms of uniform density, which all of this I will go one by one and explain why this actually becomes a hindrance. Yeah? When we talk about uniform tree density, what happens is that this is dependent on what is the optimum spacing that is available for a farmer, what are the species they are growing, what is the crown of the tree, and what is the climate, crop type, and what is the machinery that they work with. However, if you end up giving a uniform density of tree caps, then it actually forces to adopt the least denominator for the design, and it completely prevents from actually exploring this technically sound, innovative combination of tree and crops that could be actually very much beneficial for the specific site. And next is also within the definition, it also captures, certain countries do capture the static canopy threshold as well. And this regulation or this inclusion, what it does is that it kind of brings in a fear within the farmers that a single satellite image could reclassify their agricultural activity as a forest plot, therefore retroactively invalidating all agricultural payments and invoking forest compliance costs then. Yeah. The next was the crop line criteria. So if you are having crops, while the production from grassland is going to be very different from high input horticultural sites, and ignoring this contrast when it comes to this light requirements and equipment needs, it is essentially not enabling the adoption of agroforestry. It actually kind of underutilizes the sites where high tree densities would actually thrive and would be agronomically appropriate to be included. And there is also exclusion happening. This is with respect to species where negative lists are provided within the member states, or with respect to certain systems like the short rotation coppice, which is completely excluded as an agroforestry system. These are systems that are very much environmentally beneficial because there are certain species like Robinia that are nitrogen fixing, or for example SRCs that can have these nitrogen fixing shrubs and essentially prevent erosion control, and and can be something that actually diversifies its income very well for the farmers. But these exclusion of this kind of prevents them from actually having it on their land, and thus essentially even if they have it on their land, then they wouldn't be getting access to the subsidies and incentives that come with adopting agroforestry. There is also the issue about bureaucratic transaction cost. This includes things wherein if there are multiple funding lines, then you would have to apply to each of them, the paperwork that is involved, as well as having these, the small scale farmers do not necessarily have the GIS skills to actually map everything out and do these submissions. A farmer that we very closely work with on a different project also informed us that for him, it took 2 consultants over 3 days of time to actually make the submission to get these incentives and subsidies. And that actually ends up being a huge transactional cost for them. There is also the problem with the policy silos and inconsistent land codes. So where their agriculture and forest falls under different ministries, for example, in Hungary or in Spain, then the agroforestry parcels must be satisfying two sets of requirements, and this ambiguity essentially discourages uptake. Farmers prefer very simple schemes with clear and stable compliance criteria that they can easily understand and easily fulfill. And the definition is not just the semantic of it here. It essentially determines which parcels or which plots qualify for funding under CAP Pillar 1 payments. CAP is Common Agricultural Policy, and it also establishes if the forestry regulation takes hold for an harvesting comes into play once the trees mature. So this is a very important reason why defining agroforestry systems within the member states and all over the EU is very, very important and needs to be reconsidered across all member states. The second institutional barrier that we came across, which is commonly talked about and also mentioned by the previous speaker, was the high upfront cost for establishment. This is essentially there. Every farmer faces this. They are transitioning from the existing familiar system into a system where they are bringing in a lot of variables. So they are also worried about the delayed and uncertain returns that comes with implementing trees into their farms. There is also the cost of upskilling themselves as well as their laborers when they are introducing trees into it, changing of machinery that is required, and changing essentially the entire management style as well. Then there is also the inadequate or poorly designed financial incentives. And we did kind of a deep dive by looking into all the member states' CAP strategic plans. And we started off with the countries or the member states where our project is working on. And then slowly we are still expanding it. And what we find that these are most definitely poorly designed, and we tried to also capture it in detail in the report. I will not mention further here. And yes, and there is this uncertain policy framework. So over the years, since agroforestry has been legitimized in the CAP, there has been policy shifts with respect to design, funding levels, eligibility criteria, and there sometimes are talks about kind of withdrawing some of the incentives as well. What this does is that, again, it creates the fear and of not wanting to invest so much time and resources for the farmers when trees are actually multi-decade investments. And this actually drives them away from adopting agroforestry. A lack of advisory services and knowledge dissemination is also very much a key point. There is limited capacity building and extension support available to farmers when it comes to agroforestry. There is a very immediate requirements to have advisory training, education, and field-based demonstration sites that can actually disseminate the knowledge of how agroforestry needs to be designed and needs to be very site-specific and not a very generalized thing. And for it is very much essential for farmers to know that whether for their plot, whether this particular combination that they want to work with actually does it yield them whatever is their expectation. One of the last points that we mentioned in the report is also the lack of market access and value chain development, though there are so many products that can come out of agroforestry systems, including the wines from the vineyard that the speaker earlier was talking about. There are several products, but there is institutional support lacking in this case, where there is no clear, trustworthy product certification available for agroforestry products or labeling available that actually clearly distinguishes the agroforestry product from the conventional production. This is very much important so that we can emphasize what are the environmental services that comes alongside the product quality from an agroforestry system. This is severely lacking, which, if in place, would certainly boost the confidence of the system within the farmer community. So, yeah.
Prajna, sorry for barging in. You have about 5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay, then I will be quick. Okay, so yeah. So essentially, these different barriers rarely address, the current institutional setting and regulatory framework rarely address all of this. And this is actually corroborated with the findings from the farmer survey that EMEA conducted. Okay, I will try to run through the next of the slides then. Okay, so currently I want to give you a very quick peek into what is the financial support in Germany. So out of the 16 federal states, only 10 of them as of 2024 have implemented support schemes, which can be classified into subsidized agroforestry consultancy schemes or investment-based support schemes. As you can see, the rest of the states are yet to adopt this, even though it has been specified and funding support has been given out to these regions. Yeah, the same, and it varies from region to region, as you can see. And this is pretty much the same thing that we can see all across Europe in different countries. And that's why we try to capture all of this as a database where for the current cap. And this is available in Zenodo. And whenever you have time, please feel free to take a look at it and see for yourself how is it defined for each country and what are the different schemes that are available. What we did with the dynamic management tool that we developed for agroforestry systems within the project, essentially we developed this to help farmers decide whether they want to adopt agroforestry or not. But then after this, analyzing the institutional barriers, what we wanted to do was also to use it as a testing platform to see if the support measures are actually promising what they are or providing what they are promising. So in this tool, we essentially use the decision analysis approach, which is used in business analytics, specifically in the field of energy and pharma, where we try to include everything that matters. We make use of the local and knowledge and expert knowledge. We consider uncertainties, risks, and we identify the uncertainties that have impact on the outcome using the value of information analysis. It is a kind of a sensitivity analysis that we use, and we update the model with the new whenever we get new information. So essentially, we keep the tool in perpetual beta phase. So for this, we needed the conceptual model, and it is a comprehensive conceptual model of agroforestry system that captures all the different costs, all the different benefits, and different modulating parameters, which includes institutional barriers, produce failure due to extreme weather events, market opportunities, market risks, and all of this to compute net present value. And this is something that can be adopted to different systems based on what your agroforestry system is. So essentially, in our modeling process of developing the tool, we use this conceptual model and we kind of translated it into mathematical formulation in R and using the decision support package that was developed here at Hotibon. And then we essentially use the Shiny to turn it into a user interface app style. So we currently have 4 catalog of systems where one is two are from the German systems. One is an apple alley cropping system based on a real farm, and the other one is multiple species honey production with traditional orchard. That was actually a plan that was developed for a farmer here in Germany. We also used the living labs of the project. We used the Belgian living lab, wherein it is walnut alley cropping with vegetable production. And we use the MINREM, that is the UK Living Lab, to actually simulate the silvicultural agroforestry system, silvopastoral system, with where we also compare two different designs. All these tools, they actually provide the net present value as a result. I mean, this is an example for the MINREM one, where we are comparing two different designs, and they compare it against the treeless system, which we consider as the baseline in this case. You can also check out what is the difference between having an agroforestry and not having an agroforestry system, as well as there is the cash flow and cumulative cash flow. So I will go back to the slide so you can scan the QR code and see for yourself if you're interested in it. Yes.
Thank you, Prajna. That was excellent.
I hope it was on. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a message from Galina who correctly pointed out that all these tools are available on the ReForest platform. There is a link provided there. She beat me to it. Keep your questions. We'll go straight to Tiago, who will talk about how to finance this show.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Prajna. It's a pleasure to be sharing the stage with you and also talking here at EMANES. I'm also glad that I'm coming at last and also after Professor Newman. This makes my life much more easier because the first part of my presentation, I can go much more quicker on presenting the insights and the main results of, the main results of last 3 years of research that we have conducted under ReForest project. And then I can spend much more time on the financial scheme, which I think it's where the core of the presentation is. So, as you know, the ultimate goal of ReForest is to upscale agroforestry in Europe, and we do that by designing and testing a very specific sustainable finance scheme for agroforestry farmers. But then, as you may guess, for that, we had to first understand the EU's current policy and finance landscape, which means understanding the underlying conditions, what are the barriers, opportunities, drivers, incentive mechanisms, existing gaps and trends. And these were the main questions, if we have to separate this into policy and finance. These were the main questions that have been motivating our research. I'll just skip them now in terms of time, but then this resulted in the series of mapping reports. And here is very important to say that the first two reports were prepared and published by Ivan, who's here with us. I have inherited lots of work from him, so I'm very grateful. And then the third one was prepared and published this year. And there, what we are basically trying to do is to look at the most recent EU level regulations and certifications. So we have we came up with this timeline of a series of regulations where we have deeply read and identified the impact of these regulations for agroforestry farmers. We have also assessed innovative and blended finance incentive mechanisms to, they don't hear it. Is it better? Hopefully. And then we have also assessed innovative and blended finance mechanisms. So this is the narrative that we are trying to push here. We are looking to incorporate the ecosystem services that agroforestry is able to generate, carbon capture, water retention, soil health, and biodiversity enhancement into the business plan of farmers. So that is like to translate these public services into nature capital assets in order for farmers to be able to attract more investment, also to attract investment from the private sector, the philanthropic sector, and so on. We have also looked into economic literature review on payments for ecosystem services, economic valuation of agroforestry farmers against monoculture and conventional farming. And we look at cost-benefit analysis models as well. And on top of that, we also look at the global level We have considerations of COP and trade policy agreements. And on the finance side, as I said, what we have found is that agroforestry is capable to deliver strong long-term benefits, enhancing farm resilience and generating social and economic value compared to these conventional and monoculture systems. But yet, of course, the adoption remains very low of all the barriers that Prajna already presented. And the thing is that when the valuation studies, these papers, they show that when these ecosystem services are quantified and monetized, agroforestry delivers higher total economic value. So even in terms of productivity and returns of investment. And then motivated by this, we came up with this financing scheme. And these are the two reports that presents the theory and the application of the scheme into the ReForest living labs. And what we have here is more or less the main pillars of the scheme. So this is not necessarily a model, but more of a framework where we have grouped different type of payments into boxes. So we have separated payments that are referring to the upfront barriers, so the entry barriers for agroforestry farmers, then payments that are related to their actions, payments related to results they're able to present on the field. And of course, advisory services are very important to be incorporated over the time of the project. Here, I think I'm gonna skip these tables, but it's more or less the methodology that we have developed. So it follows a 6-step approach where this is more or less how we'll summarize what we are seeing now as the current scenario, the baseline scenario of subsidies. So what Professor Newman mentioned, the subsidies on production, this is more or less what we are observing on Living Labs farms and all the farms that have been connected over the project. So if the first column we are separating, this is more or less the timeline of the project. So prior to the project implementation, of course, these are where the ex ante payments trigger. So we have on our report we have identified from the CAP, from these subsidies and direct payments and state aid, where farmers could get their grants and payments from. So on the implementation of the project, the CAP Pillar 1 and 2, they provide this planning and initial setup grants. In terms of action-based payments, are quite important. Then in terms of hybrid payments that consider action and result-based payments, there's on Pillar 2, the rural development, where farmers can get operational state aid and direct payments for basic income for compliance to sustainability practices. But this is quite limited. This is what we find on our surveys, is that this sort of scenario is not enough to cover farmers' costs and their long-term investments. So this is where the application parts come from. We have conducted several surveys and interviews. In terms of data, we rely to secondary data. So we have done this EU policy mapping, so a more large-scale mapping. And then we have also done country-level analysis to explore the heterogeneity of these countries in terms of land tenure, ownership patterns, farm typologies, and so on. And then we have also looked into the specific farm-level analysis for all the 14 ReForest farms. As I mentioned, we have also conducted surveys to 38 farmers inside and outside of the ReForest scope, and interviews to these farmers, and also interviews with the financial sector to guarantee funds, for example, development banks, to also understand the investment side of the thing. And then this is the descriptive data of the ReForest living labs. So in terms of area, starting near organic livestock, you can have an idea how these farms are differentiate between each other. And we have farms from Belgium, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Denmark, Germany, Hungary, and England. What these Living Lab surveys show is that there are three clear gaps that we observe. So what farmers say on average is that their current financial scheme, it's not enough. They are not happy with the scheme that they are being offered by subsidies. Less than 40% of farmers have access to private sector funding. From Hungary and UK, none of them. And also access to advisory services appeared not to be very uptaken as well. So this is I think the main takeaway of our surveys, and the scheme that we're trying to address is really touching on these three gaps. This is what Prajna has presented before, but just for you to see the numbers, it's also presented on the report if you want to check this later. These are the main takeaways from the interviews, but what I really would like to move now, I think we are quite short on time, is really to the ReForest scheme on a more visual way. So, and this is what me and Prajna, we are trying to accomplish with the upcoming research paper. We're trying to quantify the ReForest scheme by using the model that she presented. So what we have here is a typical, stylized, typical agroforestry farmer financial projection in terms of cumulative cash flow. And what you see here is that to break even, it's usually around 5 to 20 years, depending on the system that they have. So it's a very long investment. There's also a huge initial investment entry barrier. And you see that over time, it takes long, and then there's huge volatility and uncertainty of returns. And what we do with our scheme is to plug all the components that we have into this cash flow projection, right? So the ex-ante payments should be triggered to the entry barriers, the action-based payments to the first years, hybrid result payments once farmers are able to show results, right, in terms of biodiversity, carbon, and so on, these ecosystem services. And then what I think is the most interesting part is this de-risking and blended finance mechanisms that I will present now as a way to reduce the volatility and also to connect farmers to more investment streams, so escaping from this subsidy scenario. So what we have done, we have identified on your first column the incentive mechanisms that we would like to explore. So, and then on the second column, we explained in an economic rationale how this mechanism it's able to support farmers. And then the third column, it's what we are exploring with Prajna's model on how to incorporate these payments and incentives into the model. And on the last columns are real case study examples of actions that are, or projects that are in place that are able to offer the mechanism that we have identified. So the first one, we are looking at seed funding and grants from NGOs. So these are other type of fundings to cover the upfront barrier. And we are considering them as either one-time upfront or annual periodic seed funding. So these are usually coming from donors, from grants, from catalytic funds, and impact-driven platforms. We are also considering, of course, nature capital markets, identification schemes. So these are basically the carbon market credits that are able to also generate cash flow for farmers. We're also considering impact investment blended finance crowd lending platforms. So these are platforms that investments, they're able to provide a more patient capital where the repayment of the loans are longer. There's a longer grace period for repaying them, and farmers hopefully are able to assess lower interest rates and in this way improving their net present value. In terms of risk mitigation and sharing instruments, we are considering, of course, insurance, so parametric insurance and other type of more modern insurance that some of these farmers, they are not related to. And as you can see, on the last column, there are examples where this is actually in practice, so it's not really only theoretical. And we have already mentioned the advisory component. So in terms of funding channel, this can reduce, this can improve farmers' decision making, so improve their productivity. And we are considering, of course, the consultation cost, and perhaps if there is any public advisory or any subsidies that reduce these costs, we are liking to address that on our model as well. And then the integrated value chain. This is where we are looking more into the whole value chain of farmers. So if, for example, these farmers are able to join cooperatives, so they have more bargain of power of you know, and also they're able to share the cost of their equipment. We are also considering advanced purchase agreements. So these are long-term contracts where, let's say, isolated or like a farmer, it's able to sign a long-term contract to a supermarket, and this will give them a much more certainty in terms of prices, in terms of also value chain distribution. And the last component of these incentive mechanisms has to do with the innovation part. Professor Newman also mentioned the mechanization, digitalization on the field. So if these farmers they're able to invest on MRV measurement, reporting, and verification instruments, and this, of course, will allow them to show better results more transparently. And of course, if there are any sort of subscription of these digital tools, if there are any discount on that or any subsidies, we're also accounting on our cost-benefit analysis. So I think this will summarize what we are hoping to show on our paper, is that we are comparing this baseline scenario where I mentioned that we are seeing today, where farmers are seen as isolated and only really reliant on production subsidies. And what we want to show is that if agroforestry farmers are following our ReForest scheme and able to address to these incentive mechanisms, they will present a much healthier and profitable results in terms of financial indicators. So here is also, again, a stylized cumulative cash flow projection. And what we see is that on the first years, these farmers that are following the ReForest scheme, they have a much lower entry barrier. Their break-even is also earlier because of all these new income streams and also access to advisory services that help them to make better decisions early on. And then the volatility, as we're trying to show on the graph, it's slower because first they are diversified. Of course, agroforestry farmers, they have different products that they can, so they're less exposed to shocks, and they're more resilient in terms of their field. So if there's any shocks in terms of floods, fires, droughts, they're more prepared to respond to these shocks than conventional monoculture farmers. And this is hopefully what we would like to show on the paper that we are building. So this is the QR code if you want to scan and check the dynamic management tool, where we are already addressing the financial scheme, and there we have we'll have the projections of in terms of net present value and so on. And here are QR codes for joining the platform and working groups that we are hosting through ReForest. And I think a couple months from now, we are also going to be delivering workshops on policy recommendations. So please join us there. And finally, if I can summarize the presentation is that, well, the narrative that we are trying to show is that we would like to incorporate these ecosystem services into farms' business models, so we can help them to escape from subsidies only into more blended finance scenario. And this is hopefully what we'll show on the research paper that are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. Thank you, Prajna. So this was a short overview of one of the things which we are working for in ReForest. Prajna showed us the problems, then slowly started to tilt it to solutions, and then Tiago took it a little step further and tried to illustrate how we can finance the transition to more agroforestry. Any questions, comments, please? There's a question here, then Stephen. People online, you can either speak up if you want or just pop the question into the chat. We can see it, so we'll pick it up from there.
Hi, I have a question for Tiago. My family is a family of farmers, okay? And of course, your project did not include Italy, but in my example, 85% of Italian farmers are over the age of 60, okay? So if you have a break-even entry point of 5 to 20 years, they will be all dead, okay? So do you think that an alliance between farmers and young farmers who are coming back to agriculture, because in Italy there is a huge movement called neo-ruralism, which is actually bringing young people from the cities to the countryside to embrace rural life and rural jobs. So do you envisage financially, I'm not an economist, so this is why I'm asking you, a financial mechanism which could allow the entry point of young farmers, because 85% of farmers in Italy are old?
Thank you, Francesca. This is very important, and it's also something that it's different across countries, right? We have looked at the ReForest case where we have 8 countries, but most of them are facing the same problem. And what we see from the CAP is that there is a mechanism of providing subsidies to young farmers, but this itself is, I don't think it's sufficient to promote this cultural movement, this all this, you know, as a social and cultural movement to bring back the new generation to be interested, and as Professor Newman said, to have fun on farming. So I think it requires lots of effort, not just on providing a subsidy for young farmers. This is important, of course, but then it provides, it's necessary to have this financial, and structure to convince these farmers in a more holistic way. And of course, this exchange of expertise and knowledge between old generation and new generation is key. Something that we are also considering is the contract type and land tenure, because in some countries you're only able to rent the land, and these contracts are usually quite short-term contracts. And what kind of farmer would like to invest in a 20-year break even if they only have the land which is not even belonging to them for like 5 or 10 years, right? So this is also something that is institutional. There's this gap of understanding the long perspective of these investments and the contracts that are quite short term. So I think we have to look at quite a big picture and holistic view.
Yeah, Prajna, I think you would like to chip in.
Yes, and adding on to what Tiago said, I think it is very essential that we tailor it to the boundary requirements of the farmers. Yeah, if they are at the age of 65, then go investing in something like a walnut based alley cropping system is not for them, because one, it requires a lot of management effort. Two, it is also something where if you are doing it for timber or even nut harvesting, it has a lot of labor activity involved. However, there are other agroforestry systems that they could adopt depending also on their spatial and site specific conditions, like whether it is hedges or something like this, which can still yield them some form of diversified income, but not be that much labor intensive.
Okay, thank you. Good point. That Stephen and then Victor online.
I've got 2 points. That last comment was of critical significance, very important. And it means, again, we need to deconstruct that issue. So the origin of the word farmer is Latin firma, which means contract. So it's more about a contractor than a place or a culture. And if we then look at through that lens at the young generation, so who are the new food entrepreneurs, or the ones that want to make high income from the food or other value chains, and what do they want and where do they want to live? In my experience, attempts at re-ruralification, getting young people to the countryside, doesn't work. They're not interested. So what do they want? They want a lower rate of indebtedness. So if you can provide low-cost housing and you can provide cheap, good food, they'll move to that position. And where is that position? It's the peri-urban areas. So let's leave the rural areas for rewilding and bringing back biodiversity, and let's create a new horizon for young food entrepreneurs who will have equity in the development of the peri-urban area. The second point is about where do we focus on finding the exemplars for agroforestry that we can replicate. So it's all right finding where the investment is, but before that, you need to find out where the profitable systems are, which are worthy of the investment. So by asking that question, you come to ultra high value agroforestry. Because the problem with agroforestry is the complexity of management. You're trying to do 2 things at once. You're also trying to do things over a long time period where conditions change every 5 years. It's a different system. So I've only been able to find 2 ultra high value systems, one in England and one in the Iberian Peninsula. So the one in England is cricket bat willow, where we can sell the trees standing at €2,000 per cubic meter within 10 years. So that's ultra high value. The other one is, I was eating it this morning, is Hamon Iberica. So if you calculate the value of a pig, if it's raised for that product, it's about €2,000 a pig. And that's an agroforestry product. It's acorn fed. And you can have a PDO, just like we can have English cricket bat willow as a PDO. These are the exemplars. These are incredibly investable things, very high value, high return. So I think if ReForest could face that challenge to go past the cricket bat willow barrier, instead of going faster than the sound barrier, can you go through the cricket bat willow barrier or the ballotta pig, that would be tremendous.
Okay, thank you. So there's a data point there. 1 pig equals 1 cricket bat willow. €2,000 each. Tiago wanted to add some.
No, maybe just a quick comment that I've thought on Francesca when she mentioned new ruralism. If I'm trying to link this conversation, what we have discussed over the last days on brain economy transition as well, what we are seeing in the new generation, some of them, is that of course there's this increase of anxiety and mental disorders, and there's also some people that are feeling the necessity to go back to nature, to reconnect and slow down the stress level and everything that's been generating this anxiety and so on. So this could also be a channel to be explored on incentivizing young farmers and young people to move and populate the rural communities, as I'm trying to create any link between brain capital and brain economy and neo-ruralism here. And I think Victor has his hand up.
Okay, thank you. Victor, you've been waiting for some time.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thanks a lot both for your excellent presentations. I had a question to Prajna first. I was wondering if you could share a bit more insights into some of the barriers you identified, especially those related to those I think you called value chain development. And a question to Tiago, again related to value chain barriers, but I was wondering if you could, or if you did look into the blended finance mechanisms that would integrate or incorporate some advice to farmers to tackle those value chain or market access barriers. Perhaps just one last thought, and that's maybe lower priority, but I think Steve Newman, you made a comment or a suggestion that farmers should relocate to peri-urban areas. That's a very interesting comment, but I wonder if, given that farmers are already struggling with their business models, if the land values in peri-urban areas would not hinder or challenge that idea. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for your presentations.
Can I just deal with that last point very quickly?
Okay, but very quickly. Thank you.
So the point is, if someone in the street outside says, what's the best way to get to England from here? I'd say, well, I wouldn't start from here. So if the best way to get to regenerative agroforestry is not to start from here, from farmers, it's rethinking who are the new players in the future. So I'm not suggesting that farmers move to the peri-urban areas. I'm saying that there is an opportunity for an incredible peri-urban livelihood for the young people that is healthy in terms of food, highly profitable, and can really benefit from their creativity. So they're the people I'm talking to, not the farmers. The farmers are not the ones to involve in this. Let this be a natural evolution, that way of life, maybe it's best that they're not there, that we have more rewilded areas, more wilderness, more amenity, and you can have an easier way of life in the peri-urban area. And that peri-urban fringe can be the life jacket for the city. This is the most important part of green infrastructure. If you draw a ring round a city, that's far greater in land area than the green space in the city. This is the savior of the urban future.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think there is probably the next session next year of EMANES, there is a development opportunity, brain economy opportunity, plenty of things in there. That's a good topic. Prajna, Tiago?
Yes. If I could answer Victor's question. So you asked about the value chain development barriers, right? So what we have seen is that farmers develop a lot of products out of agroforestry, whether it is packaged nuts or fruits with different quality grades and stuff like this. But when they are competing with the intensive horticultural production, they are on the losing end, because while they are providing better environmental services, they are never acknowledged for that. And they are also doing this production in the same, the LER of their production is actually much higher in an agroforestry system than in an intensive production system. So which is why what we find is that there are no well-established infrastructure to kind of send out these products into the market. Additionally, what we find is that consumers are not aware of agroforestry system and its benefits. So that, for example, when we talk about organic products, right, everybody is ready to pay the extra few cents because it is organic product. So this kind of awareness about agroforestry, we currently do not see it. And we think this is also because there are no standardized, for example, certifications are not there for agroforestry, where it is classified, okay, this is a really good product from this type of agroforest system, or there are not no labels available. So it is also what I'm talking is standardized. Yeah, there are labels available. Here in Germany, we have something like Anbau in Agrofo system, which is like produced in an agroforestry system, or there is also in Catalonia, you know, these cattle that graze is under the understory to prevent forest fires. They are also have their own branding, but these are very localized things and not in a standardized way. And what we firmly believe is that if such a standardized practice is available, this would actually kind of aid farmers in pushing out their diversified products into the market with a competing edge. Thank you. I hope that answers it.
Yeah. If I may just compliment Prajna and to answer Vitor's question, we do have a work package that is specific to value chain within ReForest. But what I have learned from their outcomes is that agroforestry farmers tend to benefit, at least the ones that we are connected to. But I think it makes sense that they benefit from short value chains. Of course, they're not economies of scale, so they cannot compete against conventional large-scale monocultures, of course. And then there's the gap on connecting to consumers because they are not aware of the ecosystem value of these products, and there's not enough labels and so on. So also this marketing branding part, it's missing. So and then from the blended finance point of view, it's really looking for advisory and finding ways to connect the farmers and translate the values that they generate into the end consumers and prioritizing short value chains. And also, I think there's quite important the culture and social aspect, because if you're supporting, I mean, your product, your farm is supporting local supermarkets and the region. I mean, the region is sponsoring your farm. They know you. They have like social connections to your farm. They even there's some exchange projects that they can pick some of the or they can act as
eco-touristic spots as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that there's the social and cultural aspect that is very important to be considered on the value chain, and then this will promote the premium price that these farmers are hoping to achieve.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. This is an interesting discussion. Just one quick comment. Do we need standardization? As in, do we need a label for agroforestry, or can we just go with the local markets and feed agroforestry off the cultural context of different European landscapes? I don't know. Open question. There is a question online. This is from Jared. It's about the scenarios and blended finance, which we explored earlier. So the question is, are some types of blended finance more amenable or suitable for different scenarios? That's one thing. And the other one is, can an individual farmer, agroforestry farmer, do this alone, or do we need to consider bundling them into or aggregating supply demand?
Yeah, these are very good questions. I think that we are looking into, of course, all the incentive mechanisms that we have mentioned there. We are not expecting any isolated farmer to be able to address all of them at once, because we're thinking about a progressive way to incorporating them into the business model. So what we will try to look at the research paper is doing sensitive analysis scenarios where, for example, we'll address one of the incentive mechanisms to a farm and then compare these mechanisms to another mechanism on the same farm to really see the marginal gains of the blended finance mechanisms. And there, I don't think we're expecting to see farmers already uptaking them and all at once. And I think the aggregate question is quite important. So in terms of farmers by themselves, or if they are able to join cooperatives, I think this is how they can improve their bargaining power and also share costs and mitigate risks and share risks as well. So I think we would like also to explore the decision to join a cooperative and how this projections. So hopefully I have covered Jared's. I see you online your questions. I think Prajna also raised a hand.
Yeah, just to add to what Tiago said, I think we are also with the tool. Our idea is also to figure out which combination works best for which system. Yeah, we are starting off with the fruit alley cropping system, but this is mainly because this is the most prevalent type of agroforestry within the European climate. So, which is why we are starting it there. And our idea is to actually figure out which one would work for best in general. But however, like I said earlier, that it needs to be tailored to the specific objectives of the farmer and the site boundaries of the farm. Yeah. So always keep in mind that whatever we talk is always in general, but when it comes to a particular farmer and their spatial extent of their farm and boundary condition, it needs to be tailored to them. Thank you.
Thank you both. Looking forward to the research paper as well.
Thanks, Raymond. There is a comment online, it's from Victor. It's about the graph that Tiago showed us with the net present value. And the comment is, it would be good to see a comparison between the agroforestry and conventional.
Actually, the graph, the red part is the conventional subsidies. But then I think it will be interesting also have no access to none of the subsidies. And I don't think any farmer will have this data from any farm, because then this will be impossible for financially impossible for a farmer to have an agroforestry system without any support. So, but then of course we could add another graph there. But I think Rim has her hand up.
Yeah. It's a good point. I know farmers who farm in Europe without any subsidies because they just say, I can't be bothered with this, I don't do it. So it's possible, but we need to find them. It's not easy. Rim?
Yes, on the previous question on the blending finance, I would think one can discuss with the European Investment Bank to develop a fund which could be dedicated to agroforestry farming in Europe, in which they have the capacity, in fact, EIB, European Investment Bank, they have the capacity to integrate all those mechanisms into a specific scheme which would be offered to agroforestry farmers in different life cycles and different scenarios. Obviously, our ideas when developing the financial scheme at EMEA was to provide a complex mechanism that would fit into different necessities or needs of the agroforestry farmers, as it is a more complex production system. So in reality, European Investment Bank is the green bank of the European Union, and actually globally, and it's the biggest financial provider in the world. So why not having a bilateral discussion with them to implement such a scheme, which is a multi-functional scheme, financial scheme, which takes into consideration what we have proposed, and then design those blended mechanisms for agroforestry farmers in Europe, of course, in collaboration with the European Union and all of this. So really moving from the system of subsidies, which we know, to a system that is reinforcing this blending finance thinking that we are proposing.
Okay, thank you, Rim. Any more questions? Yeah.
Like a short comment on the label of agroforestry, and I think it's a great idea because, as you know, and we had this discussion yesterday about the brain economy and the work we are doing. We also work with the Food and Mood Center in Australia, and they have like solid evidence that what we eat has a very direct impact on the health of our brain, health of our body, and also like neuro connections we have in our brain and the diversity of the soil. And a diversity of microorganisms in the soil has a direct impact on our health, basically. So having, we have organic food labeling is out there, it's working, it's normal to charge extra, and everybody is willing to pay for because we find it's helpful for our body. But having a agroforestry label, it makes total sense because if we just need to mainstream this information, this knowledge, which is already out there, the scientific evidence is out there that this diversity of microorganisms in the soil have a direct impact on our health. We can also like market it the right way and have it as a standardized as like organic food, which is, I think, even better than organic food because organic food is only absence of chemicals. Okay, absence of poison in our food, but but I think the agroforestry label would tell that in that food there is actually something very good for our brain and our body. So let's go for that.
Okay, let's go for that. There was a comment there, and then Stephen.
Yeah? Okay. So from my experience with the labels, like before I was working at the World Bank financing projects in agriculture, and an issue that we see in a lot of countries, and it's in Europe, but in developing countries as well, is when you start putting a lot of labels, it starts to add a lot of cost to your production. If you have an organic label, it can be 20 to 30,000 euros. If you want to apply for EU subsidies, you need lawyers, et cetera, Then now we want an agroforestry one. So you're starting to put me, if you put all of this together, we're going to go to 100,000 euros just to have paperwork done. And then what we are having is only like medium-sized or larger farmers start to go for all of this, and all the smaller ones or the younger farmers or women farmers, all the people you initially wanted to help, you're not helping them. So I'm wondering if you are not setting a trap by asking for too many labels and overwhelming with different distinctions.
Yeah, so then my final point is on scale. So agroforestry as a nature-based solution is best looked at the 1,000-hectare scale. So at the moment, most of the research is looking at the plot scale. We need to look at the landscape scale. So then when we go down that line, we say, what is the product? The product is the land betterment value. So you're taking 1,000 hectares of agricultural land, purchased as an agricultural regenerative approaches to add land betterment value. So you're wanting to get rental yield from that 1,000 hectares from people living in forest villages, all built from wood, and so as an integrated economy in your forestry village, it's a micro agroforestry economy at the 1,000-hectare scale. And the investment's phenomenal. So in England, we buy agricultural land at 20,000 euro a hectare. With a bit of magic and imagination, it's very quickly worth 2 million. So that's the kind of the kind of dialectic. That's the kind of driving force. The land potential, the land betterment value, and this is to, we've got an old discipline that's very familiar with this called land and rural and urban planning. So they're very familiar with this investment model. When you also move to this scale, the opportunities to financing are very exciting. So in my former career as director of the largest one of the directors of the largest forestry companies in UK. Our biggest clients were pension funds. So the pension funds in the UK worth several trillion. Those are the people we should be talking to. That's the scale of money we need for climate change resilience. Also, people paying into the pension fund would feel very happy of what the money is being used for, as opposed to supporting toxic value chains and fossil fuels.
Yes, thank you. Very good comment to close with. People like trees. Okay, Prajna, sorry, last thing. I didn't see you.
Oh, thank you. I thought you would close the session. Okay, just to add, why do we need a labeling, right? There was a question from Stephen, I believe. I think that when we want to scale agroforestry to a wider scale adoption, that is when labeling comes into picture, labeling or branding comes into picture. As it is, farmers who have adopted agroforestry are marketing their stuff locally through community-supported agriculture or to directly, selling it to restaurants. But when we want that competing edge, that is when it comes into play. And the idea of about having the cost, right? Like, my thoughts on this is that when we talk about establishing the advisory services and it being easily accessible to them, my hope here is that such advisory services and the subsidies to cover these advisory services would compensate for this extra cost that would befall on the farmer. I hope that's
Okay,
useful.
thank you. I was going to close the session and I'll do it now. Thank you all for your contributions. I think we clearly have quite a lot of work to do in order to connect all the pieces in the right way. I think there is a good solution on the horizon. We just need to figure out a way how to get there. One thing that was obvious these 2 days is the link between the food we eat and our brain and the brain capacity. And in that discussion, I think there's a gap, a big gap, because nobody mentions the link between our brain and what we drink. And speaking of that, we now have a 10-minute coffee break. And then we continue with the next session. So thank you all.
Thank you.